Welcome to DEFCON 3. I'm KT McFarland. Iraqi forces are pushing forward with their offensive to retake the ISIS stronghold of Tikrit. This comes as Iraq's increased reliance on Iran is raising alarms in the West and also in the Sunni world. Could Tehran's involvement also cause America's Arab allies to rethink their role in fighting the terrorists? Joining us to discuss is former U.S. Ambassador to Bahrain, Ereli. Adam, let me ask you, I've just returned from the region, and I was hearing increasing concern and nervousness on the part of the Sunni Arabs that any coalition that involves Iran is one they not necessarily don't want to be part of. I mean, what do you think?
I think that that's absolutely true. I mean, let's be clear. Qasem Soleimani, who is the commander of the Iran Revolutionary Guards, which is the sort of shock terrorist troops of the Islamic regime, is spending most of his time in Baghdad, on the front lines, with Shia militia, leading the campaign against ISIS. This tells you two things. Number one, it tells you how afraid Iran is of ISIS. And number two, it tells you how closely the Iranian regime is managing the military campaign in Iraq. And both those elements are terrifying to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Jordan, and the Sunni Arab states who see Iran as the major threat and see Iran as taking advantage of ISIS, the instability produced by ISIS, to extend its influence and its control over Iraq.
So could you go as far as to say that Iraq's military now, that the coalition that we have fighting against ISIS is really, United States coalition, but the primary fighting force is increasingly Iran or Iran-directed?
Absolutely. I mean, the way to think of it is the United States is providing air cover for Shia militia, for Iraqi Shia militias controlled by Iran. And that's a pretty unsavory mix in the sense that we're really facilitating the further Iranian takeover of Iraq. And this is a far cry from what we went into Iraq to do in 2003.
So right now the fight then seems to be between ISIS, and we know who they are, which is a Sunni radical group, which is beyond savage, and then on the other hand it's the Iraq dominated by Iran coalition. So where are the Sunni states? Where are the moderate Sunni states? Where's Egypt? Where's Saudi Arabia? Where's Bahrain? All of the countries that have been our traditional and historic allies.
Well, let's remember, the key to defeating ISIS in Iraq are Iraqi troops, number one. Number two, or the Iraqi armed forces. Number two, there aren't too many Iraqi armed forces. I mean, the army disappeared. So number three, who are the foot soldiers left in Iraq? It's the Shia militias, the Badr organization, the Asayib al-Haq, these armed militia groups of Shia fanatics that constitute the shock troops to push ISIS out. Now, where does that leave the United States, the Sunni Arab states? It leaves them in sort of between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, they're afraid of ISIS because ISIS has them in their sights, and so they're working with the United States on air operations and logistical support and all that sort of stuff. But two, it also makes them afraid of Iran because as the Iraqis push out ISIS, they're being replaced by Shia extremists who also are targeting the Sunni states. So it's really a complicated mix. And frankly, from the point of view of Riyadh or Cairo or Manama, it's damned if you do and damned if you don't.
So it's as if there's now a third force in the region then. It's the moderate Sunnis versus ISIS versus Iraq dominated by Iran.
Yeah, I don't really see much there in this idea of a third force. I mean, yes, President Sisi talked about an Arab force. There are just so many logistical and political question marks behind it. I mean, look, the one thing most Arab states agree on is that they disagree on everything. So the idea of putting together a force, command and control, who gives what's the mission, blah, 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 I don't see them getting past first base on that. Second of all, what provoked the discussion of an Arab force was not what's going on in Iraq, but what's going on in Yemen. I mean, remember, the Houthis, supported by Iran, have kicked out the government in Sana'a. The country is falling apart. And the Arab states, particularly Saudi Arabia, doesn't want another failed state like Somalia on its southern border. But again, I don't see that really happening. It's not practical.
You know, all I can conclude, Ambassador, as we say goodbye to you, is the Middle East is complicated, and it's getting a lot more complicated.
Yeah. Don't expect it to get fixed soon.
And thank you so much, Ambassador Adam Ereli,
Sure.
former U.S. Ambassador to Bahrain. Joining us now for an additional perspective is retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer from the London Center for Policy Research. Tony, we are seeing increasingly the fight in the Middle East seems to be ISIS on one hand, Sunni ISIS, and on the other hand, an Iraqi army which is largely Shiite and dominated by Shiite Iran.
Right.
Neither of these guys are our friends, so why are we helping the Iranians in this fight?
Well, it's completely insane when you consider that Iran as a nation is the largest state sponsor of terror on the planet. They eclipse even the North Koreans on a lot of the nonsense that they pull. And KT, let's be very clear on this. The reason that they're actually having success in Tikrit, when we run the tapes, and I've been talking to some folks who have been monitoring this, we're going to find out that the IRGC and the Iranian regulars are all over that. This is not simply the Iranian army, the Iranian militia. This is an effort by the Iranians to both gain ground and access to all of Iraq, to include the central government and all the places that they're now going, and pushing out the Sunni. And this is not going to go well by the fact that one of the reasons that ISIS was so successful so rapidly is because under Prime Minister Maliki, the Sunni were made a very put upon minority, and that's why you saw, you continue to see the unrest there. So simply put, the Iranians coming in, the Shia is not going to do anything to bring stability to the region or to the larger elements of the Sunni Shia struggle. So.
I was just in Cairo over the weekend, and I met with Ministry of Defense officials, President Sisi, the Grand Imam, and the Coptic Christian Pope. And what I was hearing from all of them is, where is America? But I was also hearing sort of the beginnings and rumblings of, is there a coalition that the moderate Sunnis can form, with Egypt perhaps taking the lead, that would include Bahrain, that it would include the Saudis, it would include the countries which are neither supportive of ISIS, but on the other hand are very concerned about Iraq dominating the region. I mean, what is the prospect of that?
Well, absolutely. LondonCenter.org, we have a proposal which outlines exactly that, essentially the establishment of an Arab NATO, led by Egypt, and bringing together those elements you just listed out. It's very important to, I believe, and so does the London Center, to create a treaty-type organization, KT, to emulate the success we saw with NATO in Europe. NATO was not only a military organization that focused on military requirements, but it was also a social and civil construct that helped bring the Europeans together for the now what we see as the European Union. So what you said has great merit. I know for a fact from talking to some of the same folks you do in Egypt that they are ready to lead this. And this needs to be a Sunni Shia element. I'm sorry, a Sunni Shia split. The Sunni have to be the ones who put together this coalition to defeat the ISIS Sunni. And I think it has to be Sunni on Sunni to be successful. And then there has to be a balancing, if you will, of both the Sunni and Shia elements. Otherwise, as you see right now, the Shia are pushing out all the other Sunni elements. And I think you're going to create the circumstance for a great world war between the two sides if we're not paying attention to this.
Thank you so much for joining us, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. And for more on the fight against ISIS and the very complicated situation in the Middle East, stick with FoxNews.com. Thanks for watching DEFCON 3.